Well, Jessica, I'm going to toss this over to you. Thank you for your patience. We're going to round out this panel talking about indie publishing. So we've touched on traditional and self-pub, and now we'll shine a spotlight on indie, which is smaller publishers that are outside of the big five heavyweights like Penguin Random House or Hachette, HarperCollins, etc. So Jessica, since you co-founded Shadowspark Publishing, do you want to share a bit about your publishing journey and how the company was founded and sort of like what you've learned about indie publishing and the benefit of this publishing path?
Sure. Well, Mandy and I, originally were looking into trad publishing for our own series. And we were going through, the querying, the getting agents and all of that stuff. And it is, a lengthy process. Every step of the way is very lengthy. And in the midst of all of that, she was listening. She's a rabid podcast listener. So she was listening to a bunch of different podcasts and all of that. And I'm sorry, I don't have the names of any of them.
No, it's okay.
But she came to me and was like, so, because at the time, this was, I want to say 2017, 2018. The self-publishing market, the industry, is so different now than it was even a few years ago. Not only like the everything available to self-published authors, but the perception of self-publishing, because at the time there was, at least to my mind, this preconception of people who can't really make it are the ones who self-publish, which is not accurate, but that was kind of how it was thought of. At least that's how it seemed to me. And I didn't know much about it. And she was going into the different options that we had, as far as the amount of control you retain over your work. And, because we basically founded Shadowspark to publish our own series because I am a massive control freak. And
as I think many of these panelists are.
There seems to be a theme among them.
I really do think that you have to have that kind of attention to detail and requirement to have control of everything in order to put up with all of the bullshit that goes into putting a book together, there's so much that goes into publishing even a single book. Which we have learned. We didn't know. But so then self-publishing came on, it entered the discussion, and the more we thought about it, and she came to me and was like, okay, how about a third option? What if we just started our own house? And I was like, what do you mean? How do you just, who does that? And she was like, we do. And I was like, okay. And it really was just about that simple. We're in Texas, unfortunately. And you can get, you can file something, and I'm sorry, she does all of the technical stuff. I'm the creative director. I do the covers and talk to people. I don't know the minutia, but there's a thing you can do where you can send the state $300 and form a corporation and all of that stuff. So technically I'm the CEO of a corporation, which is hilarious to me. And so, we decided that, at least for our experience in going through and querying and looking for agents and all of that stuff, and there was interest, but we came to realize that we just weren't willing to give up even an iota of control over any step of the process. And so we decided that we're most likely not alone in feeling that way. And another thing that was difficult during queries was trying to find comp titles and genres and all of that shit. Like, my series is unique. That's why I wrote it. Like, if it was just like anything else, I wouldn't bother putting in all the time. So all of that stuff. And I figured we thought that there had to be more people like that out here, who maybe don't have, because she and I have a weird conglomeration of skills and talents and whatnot that work really well into running a publishing house. She does all of the formatting, she does all the interior shit. I do all the cover design. I do the website. I do all this other stuff. At the beginning, we both did edits. Now we do have a team of editors who are also Shadow Spark authors who work with us. We have a second cover designer, things like that. Things have kind of grown over the last few years as far as that goes. But at the beginning, and still for the most part, it's just the two of us. Mm-hmm. And we have 19 authors, including the two of us. I suppose we count. And that's pretty much it. We decided to form a house. If we were going to do this, we were going to do it because from a writer's perspective, because we're writers first. Right. Before we were ever publishers or anything like that. So if I was to design a house, what would I want it to be? What kind of house would draw me as a writer to say, yeah, okay, no, these people seem pretty cool. I want to work with them. Mm-hmm. And honestly, from a business perspective, I don't know how smart that was, because we very much think of the writers and develop relationships with them. And it's never been about the money. Like Shadow Spark, we don't actually bring in a whole lot of money that we keep for ourselves. It all goes back into the business. Our authors also keep a far bigger percentage of the royalties and whatnot. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into that. But yeah, no, we thought that maybe we weren't alone in wanting it is, it kind of bridges the gap between self-publishing and traditional publishing, wherein our authors, and it's kind of difficult because I can really only speak for Shadow Spark, because all the indie houses are so different in the way that they approach pretty much every aspect of it. So, but with us, we work on developing relationships with our authors. We're purposefully pretty small. I don't have any inclination of blowing up and taking over the publishing world or any.
Back to Big Six.
No, thank you. No, not at all. I don't want that at all. I would rather have a decent number of people who we build our careers together and work with them. And basically, when it comes to who we pick, it's if genre matters not to me. Word count, I like chonky books, so none of that stuff. All of the things that kind of irritated us about other ways in which we could publish, we kind of just created our own thing. We're like, fuck it, it's our house. I can do what I want. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how that went.
You brought this up, and this is something I wanted to touch on, is like you have this more intimate approach to how you work with your authors, how you develop relationships with them. I think on your website, it's sort of like a 50-50 between the house and the authors, more or less, in terms of
as far as royalty breakdown.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then on top of that, it's like, how do you work with the authors in terms of doing things like editing and designing and then, marketing a book and that kind of stuff?
Sure. Well, we do 2 rounds of edits with each book. One is usually more developmental and the other is more line editing, grammatical stuff. Mm-hmm. There's some, crossover, obviously, with all of that. But each one goes through, and each round of edits, the editor has the manuscript for a month, and then it goes back to the author for them to, make corrections or talk to the editor about all the notes and whatnot that go through it, and they have it for a month, and then the process starts over with a different editor. And usually, one of the things we do is we have a Discord, a Shadow Spark Discord with a ton of channels that our authors are all a part of. So there is constant conversation going on in the Discord. There's, anything from beta readers, if you're working on something, you can send, they connect that way. to a complaint department, if they just need to bitch about something, and a panic room, and an anime channel, because myself and a bunch of my authors are huge anime nerds.
Yeah.
And, there's all these different aspects. There's a room because a bunch of them are teachers. I have that one muted because I don't care. But they can talk about stuff there, so we really do have, as far as I know, it's very different from trad publishing. In the end, when it comes to cover design, I'd say 95% of the covers. I do have another cover designer, our author Mariah Norris, who's coming on and is taking on certain trilogies here and there, just schedule depending.
Mm-hmm.
And our authors, when a cover's coming up, I reach out to them and I'm like, okay, what are you thinking? What do you want? Show me, and some of them send little sketches in, or some of them have commissioned artwork on their own. And if they want to do that, I'm more than happy to use it. It's really dependent on each project and each author as to what route we go. I always do all the typography and all of that stuff, and the blurb and all of that. But they have final say, basically. Because again, we approach this from a writer's perspective, and this is your baby. This is like, I'm helping. We just want to refine it and make you shine as best as you can, and make sure your voice is exactly what you want it to be, rather than maybe what you think it was at the beginning of the editing process.
Right.
And the cover plays a big role in that too. So I have my own ideas and concepts, and we will workshop it out, and I'll send them, here are my thoughts, here's some mock-ups, what do you think, what do you like, what do you not like? Because in the end, I want them to be proud of the work that's being put out. I mean, yeah, exactly. It's our house, but it's theirs. Like, that is so important to me, that whatever the project is, it's exactly what they always wanted it to be, as best as possible. So yeah, that's kind of how we approach that.
Yeah. And then when it comes to the publication of the book, we've talked about like distribution and things like that. How do you go about the distribution process of, something that a self-published author would do themselves, in terms of, getting the different formats and putting them onto the different websites, or doing print on demand and that kind of stuff? How do you guys handle that at Shadowspark?
Yeah, that is all. That's Mandy's domain. We do paperbacks and ebooks through Amazon. We've done a few things through Ingram Spark. We're kind of the problem is, those are really the big two options for whether it's self-publishing or indie publishing, right. And I know we have one of our authors, Dan Fitzgerald, he's really looking into other distribution options and what's out there. Like, we need somebody who's really, both Amazon and Ingram Spark have positives and negatives in accessing the platform and working with it and making changes. Right. in all of these different things. So, we're moving into audiobooks eventually. Right now, because we're a small house, we don't have the funds to pay for everybody to have an audiobook. I think we released like 32 books last year across our authors, and we don't have the funds for that. But that's something that, if they wanted to put the costs up front, that would be a different contract and far different royalties and all of that. And eventually we want to get to that point, which is another reason to keep it kind of small as far as our author count and whatnot. And some of the authors really want the hardcovers, and so Ingram Spark is an option for that. Amazon says they have a hardcover option, but it's not that great. No, I don't know. It's kind of a self-published, trad-published, weird conglomeration of things that we've kind of made up as we've gone along, and learned what has worked and learned what hasn't worked, and just keeping in contact with the authors. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, there's so much more to this than we had any idea
Yeah.
when we
And
got started.
from your perspective, what's like the biggest benefit of sort of bridging that gap between self-pub and traditional publishing?
Well, I think that a lot of authors who maybe don't want to go the traditional route for whatever reason, and I do like that we're having this discussion, because all of these options are absolutely viable in their own way. There's positives and negatives, and writers and authors, creatives of any sort, are mercurial at best, and what is going to suit somebody is not going to suit someone else. So to have these options is fantastic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally forgot what you asked me. I'm sorry, I got distracted.
It's okay. The benefit of sort of bridging the gap between
the reason I'm here. Yeah, well, because a lot of authors might not have the funds to be able to hire artists or editors or all of that stuff up front. It is a lot of upfront cost, and our authors don't pay for any of that, like, at least for us. When they sign with us, we split the royalties 50-50. We do some of the marketing, but we provide edits, we provide a cover, we provide, access to and exposure on social media and on the website and all of that other stuff. So if someone doesn't have those funds to be able, because I think Crystal said like $4,000, that's absolutely, a lot of stuff goes into this. So yeah, I think that if they want to retain at least more control than probably they would in trad publishing, but don't have the funds or the inclination to learn all of these various programs and platforms and all the minutia and how to read the metadata and how to do this and all those different things, we can take care of that. We'll do all of that other stuff, and we'll work together, and we're both putting in a lot of effort, so we just split it down the middle as far as whatever comes in. That's how we look at it.
Yeah, that's good. And then in terms of, earlier we were talking with Anthony and Mike about sort of like the contractual side of things. We mentioned the 50-50 royalty split. I imagine there's not like an upfront advance or anything like that. It's more so it's like this is like a mutual project that we're going to put into the world together with our different skills coming becoming unified. So how does that sort of work in terms of like the contractual side of things, or like the rights and that sort of stuff?
Well, as far as the rights go, we retain that they basically give us the rights to, to their books or their trilogies. We've offered contracts both for a single book or a standalone, or the entire series, depending on the author and where they are in the process. Valerie Storm, one of our authors, we contracted her for an 8-book series because they're mostly drafted and they were fantastic. And the first one comes out next month. But it's all dependent. We basically retain the rights for 5 years. And and the contract is set to automatically renew unless they submit something in writing 30 days ahead of time that they don't blah, blah, blah. We have had authors who decide for one reason or another that they would rather go the self-publishing route. And again, as writers, we're not going to hold your work hostage. We have issued rights reversals, certainly without charging anybody. Like, I only want people in my house who want to be there, who enjoy what we're doing, who are part of this thing that we're building. Right. And honey, if it doesn't fit for you, I want you to be happy and you go succeed however that happens to be. Here, take your rights. I'm not going to hold them hostage. It's fucking gross to me. So, no, you please, with all of my love, go. Yep. And, stay friends on Twitter.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean that's a good approach to it. And it's like, Mike, we were talking with you earlier. It's like Beyond Redemption, Harper Voyager, whatever grudges they have or whatever is going on behind the scenes. It's like, that's a fucking tricky thing, is to get your rights back from these bigger publishers, because the contracts are obviously, they have like the teams of lawyers and stuff like that who create these contracts that are much more strict, but it kind of needs to be more strict given the the nature of their
scale.
size and the distribution and everything that goes into it behind the scenes before a book is published. Does anyone, have any questions for Jessica if they're curious about indie publishing or what Shadowspark is doing? Have you got anything on your mind?
No, I just said I have no questions. It was all explained so well.
Cool.
Yeah.
And Jessica, any final comments about sort of like the indie publishing space, or perhaps like what you'd like to see more of from Indie Pub in the future?
I mean, it's such an interesting industry to be in. There's houses popping up all over now. I would suggest that authors, prospective authors, please do your research carefully. Not everybody is in it for the same reasons, and every house is set up differently, but there's definitely a lot of houses out there that expect you to pay to publish with them. And
do not pay to print, please.
No, there's tons of options out there. Just please, like I said, research some of these places, go on their website, go to their social media, find people who are associated with them and reach out to them. When we're not going to be opening for queries in the way we have in the past anymore. But when we would have people ask if it's okay to reach out to our authors. Absolutely. Go find out what it's actually like to be working with these people before you sign over the rights or give them any money or anything like that. And I'm not trying to sound like a horror story or anything, but there are definitely people out there who will take your property and your money and call themselves an indie house. And
there are a lot of horror stories from publishing in general. It's like I've seen it over and over and over again. So I'm really thankful that all of you were able to offer up your perspectives, because I think it's worthwhile for anybody who's getting into writing. Like you said, Jessica, do the research, ask questions, just put in the time before you really push your work out there. Because if it's something that's meaningful to you enough that you spent hours and hours and hours creating this world, writing down the words, refining it, all that stuff, don't fuck yourself over.
Exactly.
By going down a path.
Thing will wait. It will
come. Exactly.
Don't rush it. Seriously.
Yeah. Take the time to give your work the avenue that it deserves, that will most benefit whatever you've created, and